everybody. We're going to get started. That was my daughter Ariana and her pipe teacher Brian Millen. And he's going to be playing a few more songs after we do a few speeches. At this time I'd like to ask Roger to come up.
Thank you very much, Colin. Oh, my voice usually carries pretty good. Thank you very much, Colin. Just a couple of housekeeping. For those that don't know me, by the way, I'm Roger Stapley and I live here. The housekeeping is, if you haven't found the washrooms, they're out there by the cloakroom, something you need to know. And the other thing I'd like to point out to you that in the event of a fire alarm, please use the emergency exits. They are there, and at the front. And please go to the assembly point at the front. Stay out of the way of the fire department. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you turn it off for me. And next, I believe Bev Kloot is coming up to do a small reading. Oh, Scott. Everybody's looking over there.
Hi, I'm Bev Kloot. I've known Isabel and Colin for over 40 years. We lived on the same street in Ajax. And I was thrilled when Isabel told me she was moving to Baden because I had moved to Stratford 6 months before. My new husband, Brian, only knew his new friend, Colin, for 4 years, but the times we spent together, we had lots of fun. Colin and Brian share a lot of woodworking, so they had lots to talk about. Isabel asked me to read a poem. A light went out on earth for me the day we said goodbye. And on that day, a star was born, the brightest in the sky. Reaching through the darkness with its rays of purest white, lighting up the heavens as it once lit up my life. With beams of love to heal the broken heart you left behind, where always in my memory your lovely star will shine.
Thank you. One second.
Sure.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. I'm going to read something I prepared over the past week. Been thinking about this a lot. I'll do my best not to start crying. Doing well so far. Thank you all for coming. I know my father would appreciate seeing everyone here. I hope everybody had a chance to share a memory or two. I know a lot of people here, some people here knew him almost as long as I have. And some people here just met. So I'm going to give you a little bit of his history for the people that don't know. Charles Colin Mackay was born on the 21st of January, 1939. He grew up in a small town named Kilsyth in Scotland, which is roughly halfway between Glasgow and Stirling, if you know where they are. He was the oldest of 2 kids. His younger sister Morag being born several years later. During the war, his father was stationed with the Home Guard, which allowed him to remain with the family. He ran a small confectionery and cafe called the Kit Kat, and because of this, the family could enjoy additional rations, which was quite lucky. I remember him telling me that ice cream was not an uncommon treat, even during the height of the war. One of my mother's earliest memories was playing with my Aunt Morag at age 4. My mother and father met each other when they were both single digits in age. I'm sure at that time no marriage proposals were made, at least no serious ones. Unfortunately, my dad's father passed away when he was 12, but the family managed. Later in life, when my father was 20, he decided to move to Australia, which was one of the options a lot of British citizens took at the time. He traveled by boat to Australia, living there for almost a year before being called home to help his mother and sister back in Scotland. I'm not sure how my father felt having to return to Scotland, but I, for one, am glad he did, otherwise I may not be around, or at least I might have an Australian accent. Not long after returning, he and my mother began to date, and eventually wedding bells were in the air. While they were dating, he taught himself guitar and would serenade my mother with I Love You by Jim Reeves. Now at this point, my father did something kind of silly. He brought a brand new camera right when my parents were supposed to be saving up for their future. My mother wasn't very impressed, but she married him anyway. My dad was in the Naval Reserve. He did his training in Portsmouth, England. He eventually reached the rank of second lieutenant and began to teach seamanship to the sea cadets. This would continue in Canada, where he trained cadets at HMCS York in Toronto and worked with the Navy League, which I was a part of for a short time, in Ajax. He apprenticed as an electrical draftsman, which would eventually shape his future career. On September 16th, 1967, my parents left Scotland from Prestwick International Airport, and that's a picture that's on the slideshow if you've seen it, and began their adventure in Canada. Their first apartment was in the basement of a building. I remember them telling me how whenever they looked out the windows, which were that high, all they could see were feet walking by. As a child, I found this rather amusing. My father managed to get a position at Ontario Hydro as a draftsman, and my mother found employment at the US Embassy in Toronto. This allowed them eventually to move out of their small basement apartment and finally purchase a house in Scarborough, Ontario. This is where both my sister and I were born. Not long after, with fears of one of their children running out into Scarborough traffic, they moved to the lakeside town of Ajax in 1975. And this is where my memories really begin. Now, you may have noticed that I share the same name as my father. Even though his first name is Charles, everyone called him by his middle name, Colin. Let me tell you, having two people with the same name announced began to become mildly confusing. My mother would call out Colin, and we both answer. So over time, my father was Big Colin, and I was Little Colin. Yeah. So how times changed. This particular naming scheme eventually failed for obvious reasons, and it just became Daddy and Colin. As I grew up, I knew my father to be a bit of a Renaissance man, even if I didn't realize it at first. Anything he put his mind to, we could do. Watching him just do something successfully was just a normal part of my childhood. I suppose at the time, I assumed everybody's dad was like that. He loved to cook. He'd make everything from fish and chips to homemade stir fries and soup. Oh, he loved this soup. And scones. He made the best scones. They were always a wonderful treat. Scones, tomato. My father had a lot of hobbies. He was a photographer and belonged to the Ajax Photography Club. He took wedding pictures and even built himself a darkroom in the basement to develop his own film. I used to love playing with his Minolta SLR camera. No film in it, of course. But when he was older, he imparted some of his knowledge of photography to me. And while I've taken to photography, I didn't do anything anywhere as near as he did. I do enjoy it, though. Luckily, I don't need a darkroom because everything's digital now. I remember him making beer. And while not as vividly as my mother, I do remember the smell of the hops all through the house. Luckily, the beer making didn't last too long. But it did lead him into winemaking. He'd head out into, he would walk down to the lakeside park and pick wild peaches to make peach wine or peach jam. He'd gather wild fruit and, of course, spring water, all for his wine. There were always large winemaking bottles, and if you've never seen them, they're huge. They're the size of water cooler bottles and glass and in the basement. And there was always something fermenting in them. Eventually, he ended up making a wine rack in the basement. But due to a slight miscalculation, it went from 120 bottles to 240. Yeah, he made it double by accident. Not that it was ever full, but it's a wonder how I never grew up with a taste for wine, though. I don't remember the basement of our house without the wood-burning fireplace. I loved fires as a child. Heck, I still do. I remember sometimes we'd make toast and sprinkle sugar and cinnamon on it. I'd spend my time poking at the coals. The reason I bring this up is that my father built that fireplace, and it's one of my oldest memories. I was too young to help, but I remember the giant hole in the side of the basement, and I remember my father and some of the neighbors building that fireplace from scratch. When I was 5 or 6, he decided to build a remote-controlled tugboat, hoping that I'd become interested in working on it with him. Well, I wasn't all that interested in building it, but I did think driving the boat around would be kind of cool. Unfortunately, I'd have to wait. That boat sat half-built in a box in the basement the entire time they lived at Ajax. In fact, it came with them when they moved to Foxborough. And much to our surprise, last year he finished the boat. Finally, after 40 years, sanded, painted, and ready to go, it launched to much fanfare in the bathtub. Later, it was relaunched at the pond here and Foxborough, and it did actually make an appearance in my pool in my backyard. Sometime in 1981 or 1982, in another attempt to get me interested in something, my parents decided to purchase a computer, an Apple II Plus. But this wasn't pre-built Apple II. This wasn't even how you build a computer today. This was a kit with the main circuit board, some basic instructions, and every chip, resistor, capacitor, and diode completely separate. Had to be completely soldered together, bit by bit. I don't remember doing much of it. I don't honestly remember even how long it took to build, but I remember being completely fascinated with this strange device. It set my career path, and I've been an avid computer enthusiast ever since. I could bore you with all with enough technobabble you'd want to gnaw your own arm off, and all because of that one act. My father grew his own vegetables, pickled his own beets. He was always very proud of his tomatoes. But there was one thing my father was known for, by just about everyone that knew him, and it's hard to explain just how passionate he was about his woodworking. He told me that he started learning how to build things just so he could save money. My parents wouldn't have to go out and buy something. He'd just build it. Well, it started small, but quickly grew. I can't remember a weekend he wasn't in the garage. I remember the smell of the wood, the sound of the equipment, the sawdust everywhere. Their house was filled with all the things he made, and still is here in Foxborough. If you ever visit my mother's house here, you'll just see some of his work. A short list of things I remember, or still have, are my current and my childhood bedroom set. I don't have the childhood one anymore. It's a little small for me. The kitchen table, he made a whole kitchen, cupboards and all. A dining table, china hutch, server, oak chest, side tables, chest of drawers, computer desks, knife handles, shelves, fireplace surrounds, kitchen islands, deacon's benches, and the change table for my child. He even took up carving ducks for a while, and they're in display in the basement. And that's just some of the finished items. The number of jigs and small tools he made himself was almost as numerous. Woodworking was his passion. He loved it. There's a photo album over there with a lot of the things he made. I remember just before they moved here to Foxborough, he was getting rid of his woodworking equipment, selling it off. I know this wasn't easy for him. I drove down in a huge box truck, complete with a hydraulic lift on the back, to inherit a few of his items like his table saw and his drill press. He came back with me and we proceeded to demolish some of the old benches in my garage and get his tools installed. Well, I did definitely learn from him. I don't use them to the extent he did, but I'm happy to have those things that gave my father such joy. My father was an avid reader, so much so that the librarians at Ajax knew him by name. Every night he'd go to bed, but not without having read at least a chapter of his current novel. Fantasy, sci-fi, mysteries, they're all his favorites. My father retired from Ontario Hydro in 1993. My parents purchased a travel trailer and took off for the open road. They'd drive out to Calgary to visit my sister or spend a few Septembers touring through the East Coast. And of course this means they'd miss my birthday, but I think that was the plan. Aside from the trailer, my parents began going on cruises, and during the cruising season would disappear into the high seas, usually somewhere in the Caribbean. My father truly was a modern-day Renaissance man, but he was also a loving, kind, thoughtful, intelligent, funny, loyal man. He was an amazing role model. This is where I cried reading it last night, too. Now, before I finish, I'd like to tell you a little joke. One that my father told me on my wedding day. He told my wife to place her hand on the table, and then asked me to place mine atop hers, which I did. He then said, "And that is the last time you'll ever have the upper hand again." My father had a sense of humor, but often his jokes would be a groaner. That was a good one. Thank you. So I now would like to ask Roger to come back up, please. He's going to say a few things.
Very.
First, mine was a little long. I could have filled it with another 3 pages.
I'm at the point where I no longer rely on my memory.
I'm already at that point.
Already at that point. Just a couple of words. Colin and I met here at the rec center about a year and a half ago, and our common interest was the woodworking shop. That's not a surprise when you heard from little Colin just how passionate he was about woodworking. He stopped me out here one day and said, hey, can you show me the woodworking shop? And I had a key at the time, I took him down. Over time, I learned just how knowledgeable he was regarding the equipment and saw firsthand the very fine furniture he'd made. I've seen a lot of the pieces that you referred to, Colin, and they're just beautifully done. Colin co-managed the shop along with Bob Norman, another resident here, a retired professor, himself an avid and accomplished woodworker. Bob is not here today, but he has provided a note for me to read. And by the way, I really agree with the comments that he has made here. So this is the words of Bob Norman. Jean Ann and I am sorry we cannot attend this memorial service. We're out of the country. We first met Colin and Isabel at a Foxborough Green choir rehearsal shortly after they moved in a few years ago. Both were very friendly. Colin gave all he had to the choir, but found it was tiring with his Parkinson's problem and felt it was best to put the choir behind him. Luckily for Foxborough Green, and for me, Bob Norman, it emerged that Colin had amazing skills and background as an expert woodworker. I had volunteered to try to look after the woodwork shop in the basement of our community center. I was told that Colin would like to help. I contacted him immediately. He said, yes, lucky me, lucky Foxborough. I had many years of experience with power tools as a hobby woodworker and background in buying and using electronic equipment in a laboratory. I knew how to run a lab. I quickly discovered that Colin knew how to run a woodworking shop. Compared with his shop management background, I was a rank amateur. Colin was a pro. He was a treasure to Foxborough Green. He had supervised much larger shops than ours and was an expert woodworker himself and acquired intimidating knowledge about saw blades, bandsaw maintenance and setup, safe operation of miter saws, table saws, thickness planers, and all the other potentially dangerous equipment in our shop. Colin was readily willing to share his knowledge with me and time. We spent many hours together in and out of the shop making support tables for heavy equipment and safer looking at equipment and buying better saw blades at Lowe's, buying and adapting a table for a new miter saw. Together, we worked out and posted a list of shop safety and maintenance procedures and safe tips for shop users, much of it taken from other shops that Colin had supervised. I was his student. He was the professor. Colin had physical difficulty at times getting into the basement of the workshop at the rec center. He got stuck in the elevator once, and after that, managed to get up and down the stairs one way or another. But he was there. I wish I met Colin many years ago. He was a terrific guy to work with, fun, funny, dependable, knowledgeable, skillful. All of the characteristics that one values in a friendship. Unfortunately, a friendship that began too late and ended too soon. Fare thee well, Colin, wherever you are now, maybe helping God fix things. Isabel, with heavy hearts, Jean Ann and I offer our condolences to you and your family for losing Colin. So in closing, to Jenny and Colin, we hope you'll take comfort in knowing your mom is well settled here in Foxborough Green, surrounded and supported by our many friends. Watch me trim this.
I'm going to ask my mother-in-law Shirley to come up, and she's going to read a small poem for us.
Yeah, the old mother-in-law. My name is Sheree Mackenzie, and I'm Colin's mother-in-law, as you just heard. And I would like to read you this little poem. It says, remember me. Don't remember me with sadness. Don't remember me with tears. Remember all the laughter we shared throughout the years. Now I am contented that my life is worthwhile, knowing that I passed along the way, I made somebody smile. When you are walking down the street and you've got me on your mind, I'm walking in your footsteps, only half a step behind. So please don't be unhappy just because I'm out of sight. Remember that I'm with you each morning, noon, and night. And Colin, everybody here and all your family and friends are very sad that you have left us. Thank you.
All right, and now it's my sister's turn to come up and say a few things. Jennifer, if you have a minute.
So again, I'd like to express our thanks for everybody coming to celebrate the life of a wonderful father, Brother Gamora, loving husband, my dad, Charles Colin Mackay. I'm going to cry all the way through. In reading the cards and letters my mom has received, the light my dad left shines through in everyone's words. Over and over, he is described as a kind man, always ready with a smile, a good man, a gentleman. Well, he may be biased, but we agree wholeheartedly. My daddy was the best daddy. He was a dad that, as Colin said, he could do anything. He had a boundless energy and desire to learn. Forever the optimist, the glass was always half full, preferably Scotch or Guinness. He was always whistling or singing, usually on bright summer mornings to wake the teenagers up. He fixed cars and motorcycles, once even fixed a motorcycle in his mother's lounge room. He did home repairs and renovations, maybe not as fast as my mom wanted, and definitely with more sawdust than should have been allowed. He taught himself to play guitar and piano. He cooked and loved trying weird and wonderful foods. Crickets or chocolate-covered ants, anyone? Because he would try them. As my brother said, he was a skilled woodworker, and we are blessed to be surrounded by the beautiful pieces he made. He taught my brother and I many things, but the greatest gift he gave was his curiosity, his optimism, and his desire to learn. He was a voracious reader, and from him, my brother and I got our respective love for science fiction. I still remember summer nights where Colin and I would voluntarily come in from playing with our friends to watch Doctor Who with our dad. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't afraid to call rubbish, or when we were older, bullshit. When Colin and I tried to stretch the truth, but that dreaded wooden spoon rarely came out, at least for me. There are just so many things to say. Colin did a great job. It's definitely a loss, but I know he'll always be with us. I hear him in my brother's laugh and his bad jokes. I see my dad and my son smile and his long Mackay legs. He's there in my daughter's joie de vivre, and he's forever entwined in our hearts and our souls. When I think about my mom and my dad and their abiding love for each other, there's a poem that I can't stop thinking about, and I'm sorry, Mom, but I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, my dear, and whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate. You are my world. I loved you so much, Mom, so much. And we love you, and we love him. Now to end, I think it's only fitting that I steal a quote from the good Doctor Who, as it does seem to sum up and be very fitting for my dad. I am and always will be the optimist, the hoper of far-flung hopes, and the dreamer of improbable dreams. We love you, Daddy.
That's everything we have planned to do, so at this point, I'm just going to ask everybody to please enjoy some lunch and have a chat, talk about my dad, talk about memories, whatever makes you feel happy. And please don't leave very much of it, because we have to take it all home. Thank you very much.